स्ट्रेटजी वाले सेशन सब भाग जाते हैं, तो कहते हैं हम तो है ही नहीं क्लास में. Okay, so let us try to understand, okay, what is history, etc. Such topics, they are not going to come in your mains examination, but they are very important for your interview. मैं तो अभी से ही सोच के बैठा हूँ इंटरव्यू कॉल आने वाला है, ठीक है. रीजन बीइंग ऑल ऑफ यू आर फॉर दिस पर्पस ओनली, राइट. दे विल आस्क यू व्हाट इज हिस्ट्री, आपके पास आंसर नहीं होगा. दे विल आस्क यू हाउ आर वी कैटेगराइजिंग द वेरियस फॉर्म्स ऑफ हिस्ट्री, एंशिएंट, मिडिवल, मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड, एक्सेट्रा. So all those things, those basic things we are going to cover today. From tomorrow we'll start with our syllabus of sources. Okay, all of you know the first unit is sources itself. Okay, so tell me, what is history? What is the meaning of history? Knowing about our past is history.
The study of past to understand present and to foresee the future.
Okay, ठीक है. Anyone else? When somebody says that is an historical event, that is not history. Any event which has happened in the past, it's an event, it's not history. How to create history, मतलब वो वाला नहीं, मतलब movies वाला नहीं, we have created history, this and that, वो सब नहीं. What is history in academic sense? ठीक है. So arranging all the important events in chronological manner. Anyone else? Try to define it. ऐसे questions आएंगे आपके सामने. This is not for fun. Okay, yes. Yes. Okay. Narration of the past events. You're saying examination and evaluation. You have to remember at least one definition for your interview. What is the meaning of history? तुम सारे कोट याद करके आए हो क्या? History is the memory of humankind. And उस पे जब काउंटर क्वेश्चन आएगा मेरी मेमोरी में नहीं है, हाँ, फिर क्या करोगे? पहेलियां बुझा रहे हो. History is the memory of humankind. ठीक है, in a sense we can say so, but this is a kind of statement made by big personalities, है ना. In civil services, your aim should be to make it easy for the other person to understand, not to confuse them. कि memory of humankind, फिर वो बैठ के बैठा हुआ आराम से, क्या memory है मेरी. Yes. So all of you understood one thing. हमें किसी को भी definition नहीं आती है. Alright. But basic कुछ ना कुछ हमने टच सब ने कर दिया है. Somebody is saying yes, chronological manner. Somebody is saying narration of the past, okay, and somebody is saying in examination and evaluation. All these are elements of history. Okay, there are going to be some events. Somebody is going to analyze them, evaluate them, and then eventually they are going to put it in a chronological manner. This is what history is all about. And you have to remember these basic principles of history. Kindly see your handout. In your handout, there is one professor, Richard J. Evans. Good afternoon to all the online students. Richard J. Evans. So he says it is an academic discipline which uses narrative to describe, examine, question, and analyze past events and investigate their patterns of cause and effect. Okay, this is very important. Whenever you read about history, all of us, when we say we should learn from it, so what do? We learn about the causes of various events and then finally consequences. Okay, so this is the basic difference or basic definition of history which you need to remember. ठीक है, simplistic way में याद कर सकते हो कि भाई ठीक है, all the important events in the history of humankind, they are evaluated, they are examined, and eventually they are put in a chronological manner. This is what history is all about. Whenever this question is asked to you in the examination, or examination में तो नहीं आएगा, mostly in interview such questions are asked. So there you should remember this definition, very plain, but you should be able to communicate to the other person. ठीक है, तो इसको याद कर लेना, what is the meaning of history. इससे ज़्यादा हमें इसमें रट्टा मारने की जरूरत नहीं है. There are various viewpoints. If you go, ठीक है, somebody asks you what is history, they can be, every time there's going to be different definitions. Like here you can see it is an unending dialogue between present and the past. Okay, and he equates historical knowledge with what is known. There can be n number of interpretation. Sometimes there are some professors who are sitting in the interview panel. They'll say these kinds of statements to you, and they'll ask what is the meaning of it. And you have to understand, okay, this is what they are trying to ask. Just remember this. E.H. Carr, he says this, then again he says one more thing. Suppose the event happens, by its very virtue, do you think it's become part of history? No, it's just an event. We require some person, and who is that person going to be? That person is going to be a historian. Okay, they are going to write about it, and then eventually it becomes part of the consciousness. Okay, so if you see in India, suppose koi bhi event hai, like the discovery of Harappan civilization, if nobody would have written about it, had it been part of our textbooks? No, it would not have been there. That's why he comments, and it's a very good comment. The historian without his facts is rootless. Okay, you understand the difference between history and mythology? Mythology is not based on facts. Okay, they are not verified. Even if they are based on some fact, they are not verified or verifiable. Like suppose somebody says ki Ramayana jo hai, to what extent Ramayana happened or did not happen. So we may find some of the points ki haan theek hai, this is there. Like Ram Setu, everybody talks about it, hai na, Adam's Bridge, etc. But to what extent it is correct or incorrect, nobody knows. That's why they are known as epics, something which is not based on true facts or which cannot be verified. But if somebody says India became independent in 1947, that's a very true event because it can be verified. Okay, so that's why he says historian without his facts is rootless. But similarly, the facts without their historians are dead and meaningless. They'll remain just some events which will not be covered by any historian. That's why it's a very good quote. Okay, both the things you need to understand. Yes, there can be events, but without interpretation, those events will remain just events. They will not become part of history. And this is the opinion of E.H. Carr. He also say the facts speak only when the historian call on them. It is he who decides to what facts to give the floor and to what give order or context. Reason being, same fact can be interpreted in multiple dimensions. Okay, like if you find coins, you can say, हाँ ठीक है, economy was very vibrant. Okay, but somebody can also say कि the scale of the coin is less. That's why the economy was going on the downhill. Somebody says कि if there is impurity in coins, it's a sign of degradation of economy. But somebody can also say, since the economy was expanding, metal was less, so we had to introduce impurity. So it's all about interpretation. Same fact can be used multiple times. Okay, that's why this is very important. And because of this, we see the beginning of various schools of historiography. Whenever any event is interpreted, it is interpreted in a manner, okay, and the process which is followed for interpretation, that becomes a school of historiography. Okay, so its history is nothing but the product and historiography is the process. As all of you know, there are 4 schools of historiography in India. The first one was the colonial school, the second one was nationalist, the third one was Marxist, and the fourth one is subaltern. These are the 4 major schools. Other than this also there are some schools which focus on some different interpretation. Like recently if you see, Hindutva school has also risen, which all the major events they are being interpreted with their viewpoints. Okay, I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong, but they are one school of historiography. Okay, but the four major ones which are essential for our optional preparation, the four include, the first one is colonial. Within colonial there's some distinguishing which we'll do. Orientalist hai, Cambridge school hai, all that we'll do. After colonial we have nationalist. The third school is Marxist, and last school is subaltern. All these four schools, they follow some processes for writing history. Like if we see the colonial school, the first school, okay, in India, there is a debate with respect to history. And this is a general comment on the people of India. The comment is, Indian people are not historically conscious. Do you say yes or no? If you see India's ancient history, majority of the text, है ना, कौन-कौन से sources हैं which we use for forming the ancient history? We have archaeological sources, and then we have literary sources. If we see India's literary sources, majority of these sources, they are religious. Okay, we require sources so that they can be interpreted, and the process is known as historiography. The final product is history. This is what we have understood so far. But when it comes to ancient India or India's ancient past, India is considered as lacking historical consciousness. मीन्स हमें कोई ज़्यादा मज़ा नहीं आता हिस्ट्री को प्रिजर्व करने में, जो हो रहा है चलने दो. दिस इज मतलब चलता है एटीट्यूड. दिस इज व्हाट दे आर टॉकिंग अबाउट. व्हाट डू यू थिंक सो? ऐसा कुछ है क्या, या हम लोगों की मेमोरी वीक है, या बादाम नहीं खाया इंडिया वालों ने? What has happened to us? This criticism comes from the first school, that is colonial school. So we have to also understand, whenever any school comes, it comes with certain intention, it comes with certain motive. What was the motive of colonial school?
Justify their rule.
To justify their rule. This was the most important thing. They wanted to understand about our past so that they can rule us effectively. Okay. And if you want to rule someone, what is the first principle? Destroy the confidence. Confidence खत्म कर दो. सबसे पहला रूल यही होता है, right? And then eventually you can justify your rule. And this is what they were doing. When they were writing history about India, first they said, you people do not know how to write history. तो हम थोड़े से परेशान हो गए. ऐसा क्या हो गया? साहब को किसी ने बोल दिया हिस्ट्री ऑप्शन आता है? यार हाँ, क्या बात कर रहे हो बताओ? कोई नया बुक आया क्या? Okay, so they start destroying your confidence like this. So first उन्होंने ये बोला कि भाई consciousness नहीं है. Second, they said India was never a land of progress. Okay, so they came up with one more concept. This was one concept. India has lacked historical consciousness. Second, they said there are various dark ages in India. Okay, you understand the meaning of dark age? In which there is no significant progress, or we are going in backward motion. So all these justifications, okay, all these important things were being used by the colonial historians because they were trying to justify their rule. And as a rule, when somebody is going to try to destroy you, what will you do? You will come up with your own reaction. That school became the nationalist school. These people said India has had a very rich past, and we also had the concept of golden age. Though in comparison to the dark age, they came up with the concept of golden age. They applied this to various rules. Like all of you know, Gupta has been called a golden age. Okay, so nationalist historian, they started focusing on various major Indian dynasties and kept on popularizing them. If we see the historical processes or the historiography, So far, both these schools, they have not focused upon either India's economy or India's social structure. Their focus was mainly on political. Reason being, they wanted to justify the rule, and as a reaction, they wanted to question that. Okay. Then comes the third school, that is Marxist school. Okay. Marxists have their own kind of biases. They have two principles. First of all, they believe in the concept of class. Okay. And by using this concept, they try to describe India's society as well as India's economy. You tell me, in India, what is more relevant, class or caste? Caste, yes. The whole nation, whole economy, whole polity, it is on the basis of caste in India. But still, Marxist historian, they choose class. Reason being, Marx ज़्यादा क्या बोल के गए? The world is divided between haves and have-nots. So they were under compulsion. Because they were Marxist historians, they were under compulsion to accept this basic idea that there were classes in ancient India. There can be classes, but they were not that much divided as we see in the writings of Karl Marx or we see in India. ऐसा है ही नहीं. Alright. This was the third school. So far, first school, second and third. First two focus on polity, then they switch towards society and economy, but still the major focus was lacking on the common people. People who is peasants, people, women. Okay, so what is the role of women in ancient India? Nobody knew about it. What is the role of common people in India's freedom struggle? Nobody knew anything about it. आजकल आप देखते हैं न्यूज़पेपर्स में न्यू एंड न्यू लीडर्स, देयर नेम्स आर कमिंग एंड वी आर नॉट एबल टू रिकॉग्नाइज देम कि ये कौन है. ओके, रीजन बीइंग आर स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड जो भी हिस्ट्री बना हुआ है, वी आर नॉट कवरिंग द कॉमन पीपल. People like you and me, we have no history. History is made by winners and losers. या तो बहुत बड़ा winner बनना है या बहुत बड़ा loser बनना है. Then you will be covered in history. Common people, they do not have any history. So to cover that, the subaltern school came. So that's why this fourth school, it is also known as history from below. Okay, rather than above. है ना? All the important political leaders, पूरे दिन newspaper उनको cover करता है. Do they cover you or me? No. Reason being, we are not that much important for the society. Okay, but still, it is a duty of historian to have some semblance of their history, and this is currently being done by the subaltern school. And the most important person related to this school is Ranajit Guha. Ranajit Guha is the most important personality, and this school has started around 1980s. Okay, so this is the process of historiography. अभी हम इसको डिटेल में करेंगे. आई एम जस्ट ट्राइंग टू टेल यू व्हाट इज द मीनिंग ऑफ हिस्टोरियोग्राफी. यू फॉलो सम प्रोसेसेस like the process followed by the colonial. What was the process? To make people of India feel belittle about themselves so that they can justify their rule. The process followed by the nationalists, do some researches and glorify India's dynasties so that they can counter the colonial propaganda. Then the process followed by the Marxists, their Marxist principles. Okay, and they followed a certain process in which they were trying to focus on society and economy. And finally, the process being followed by the subaltern. It is the history of the common people. So all these processes, this becomes the schools of historiography. Okay? So we are able to understand what is the meaning of history. Is that clear to all of you? Second, we have certain schools of historiography and the various processes being followed by that separate one schools from the other. Otherwise, एक ही school होता. But these are different schools. And that's why they are known as the four important schools of Indian historiography. Previously, it was in our syllabus. UPSC used to ask question also in 2007. Last time they asked question, what is the approach to early Indian history? These are the four approaches, the manner in which the Indian history is interpreted. Okay, this can be asked in the interview, but generally they are not being asked in your main question answer ऐसा नहीं आता directly. But still, you can use them when you wish to write opinion. Okay, like as suppose easily किसी भी टॉपिक पे अगर आपको व्यू पॉइंट बनाना है नेशनलिस्ट का, तो कैसा व्यू पॉइंट होगा? You have to glorify it. Okay, so you can say nationalist school has glorified this event. This can easily be used anywhere. Similarly, Marxist. Okay, Marxists, what they do, they use economy as the most important parameter, which is mostly guiding the history of people. Okay, so suppose the concept of whenever feudalism, there are certain concepts which are related to each and every school. Like the concept related to Marxist is the urban decay, feudalism, all those concepts, monetary anemia, all such concepts, they are linked to Marxist school. Throughout ancient India, we'll discuss these school time and again, but in the form of debates, not in the form of their basics. Debates being, suppose if a question comes, what are the factors responsible for the decline of Mauryan Empire? So there is always going to be an economic point of view, and that economic point of view is going to come from Marxist historian. Okay, if there is some general reaction, it can come from colonial, all right, or there can also be a subaltern point of view. All right, so in every specific historical debate, these schools are going to differ. Their viewpoints, they are going to differ, and this is what we need to understand in whole of our history optional. हर टॉपिक पे अगर आप ये डिस्टिंग्विश कर पाओगे in Indian history, that means you're going to get very good marks. And this is the basic principle of getting high marks even in your interview, where they can ask you such basic questions are being asked, because क्या होता है ना, हमने एंशियंट मिडेवल मॉडर्न वर्ल्ड रट लिया, मार्क्स भी आके बाद में ये नहीं पता कि हिस्ट्री क्या होती है. आई नो कि हिस्ट्री ऑप्शनल में क्या है, बट आई डू नॉट नो व्हाट इज हिस्ट्री. दैट्स व्हाई दे ऑलवेज आस्क सच क्वेश्चंस वेयर एवरीबॉडी इज गोइंग टू फील अनकंफर्टेबल. ठीक है, तो ये वाला जो आपको हैंडआउट मिला हुआ है, द मेन पर्पस ऑफ दिस हैंडआउट, इसको आप इंटरव्यू तक संभाल कर रखेंगे. ठीक है, इसको जितना बार रिवाइज कर सकते हो, अपना मेंस में देखे उसके बाद पढ़ लेना. There are some concepts which I am going to discuss from this, but this is very important for your interview. Preserve it for that purpose. Okay. एग्जाम में ऐसा अब यहाँ से आना बंद हो गया. यहाँ से कुछ कॉन्सेप्ट है मैं जो आपको समझाऊंगा, जैसे कि वन कॉन्सेप्ट इज विद रिस्पेक्ट टू पीरियडाइजेशन ऑफ हिस्ट्री. हाउ आर वी डिवाइडिंग इंडिया इनटू दीज स्पेसिफिक पार्ट्स की एंशिएंट, मिडिएवल और मॉडर्न में कैसे डिवाइड किया हमने. व्हाट इज द प्रिंसिपल बिहाइंड इट. Was this the first manner in which India was divided? No, the first was Hindu period, then Muslim period, and then British period. This was the initial differentiation of periodization, and this was done by the colonial historian on the basis of religion. Okay, तो ये सब अभी डिस्कस करेंगे, but let us just understand a few more point of view. Okay, see the viewpoint of Elton in his work, The Practice of History. Consider historians to be a discoverer. Okay, the establisher of the fact and impartial interpreter to whom there remains an objective distance with the evidence. Do you think these historians, they are that sacred कि इतने प्यार से अच्छे से पूरी हिस्ट्री निकालते होंगे? Everybody has ideology. If suppose somebody is right wing, whatever history he is going to write, that's going to reflect the more or less the thinking of that wing. So nobody is pure. Even though when we talk about what should be the quality of a historian, okay, we can easily identify. If you wish to become a historian, you should have certain qualities, like you should be impartial. You should know how to do critical thinking. You can evaluate all the sources which are linked to an event. You should know how to connect causes with effect. Okay. Such qualities of a historian are also described by Kalhana. All of you know about Kalhana? He was a historian from Kashmir. Okay, he has written one famous book known as Rajatarangani. Or the Stream of the Kings, in which he also describes that there are certain qualities which should be there with the historian. The person should be impartial. It should not be कि जो अपना viewpoint है जबरदस्ती उसके अंदर डालने की कोशिश कर रहा है for some political motive, okay, or any motive. Or he should have critical thinking, okay, or she should have a total control over sources. Some of the historians, they use only one source, and that source itself may be illegitimate. It may not be true. Similarly, the historian should be able to connect causes with effect. These qualities should be followed by a historian while writing history, and these are even mentioned by Kalhana. Okay, but do you think so all these things are being used? सारी follow होती 100%? कभी नहीं होती. That's why every event has multiple opinions. There can never be an absolute truth in terms of history. Okay, that's why it is often said that nobody can change history. Nobody can change history, not even God, but historians can. है ना? Nobody can change history, not even God, but who can? Historians. They can change any narrative. Reason being, any event can be interpreted in any manner. कैसे भी कर लो उसको. Okay, like when the Cold War started, okay, or just take the example of Second World War. When Second World War was starting, the opinion coming from the side of Britain was, since Germany has signed a pact with Russia, okay, and we were thinking that they are going to fight with communists rather than with us. That's why we are starting the World War. कौन एक्सेप्ट करेगा ऐसे व्यू पॉइंट को? किसी ने लिख के दिया था ये चीज. These are all interpretation. Or if you ask someone ki who has started the Cold War, the Russians are going to say Americans. Americans are going to say Russians. Everybody defends their point of view. So it's very difficult to have a very impartial opinion on every event. Okay, and that is the source of debates. Why debates happen? First of all, because of different viewpoints of historian. Second, different emphasis with respect to the any event. Like somebody asks you a question, what is the factor responsible for outbreak of French Revolution? This is the question asked. Somebody is going to say it was political factor which led to the revolution. The other person says no, it was economy which led to. Somebody said no, it's the philosophers which were responsible for the outbreak of revolution. So it means on same event we have different perspective and they are giving weightage to every other viewpoint. This is the source of debates. Okay, so since we do not have any specific framework which can be attached to a historian, that's why it leads to large number of debates. Right? Let's see one more viewpoint by R.G. Collingwood. He says the idea of history. He defined historical knowledge essentially scientific and saw the historian's task as the reenactment of the past thoughts. This is a question which is asked in the interview. They say, do you think history is a scientific subject? What do you think? Is history a scientific subject? Yes, no. हम तो आर्ट कहते हैं इसको. History is an art or history is a scientific subject? Yes, good. So it is scientific in that manner. Whatever data, facts, etc., which is collected, it is done in a scientific manner. And finally, the whole history. You see your syllabus, it is about causes and effect. This is the basic principles of science. Cause and effect, theory and practice. Okay, the same thing is in history also. That's why history is considered as a scientific subject. Then एक ये क्वेश्चन भी पूछ लेते हैं कि भाई पढ़ना ही क्यों है. वो तो अलग बात है, आईएएस बनना है, ठीक है. बट अदर देन दैट, फॉर दोज पीपल जिनको आईएएस नहीं बनना है, व्हाई शुड दे स्टडी हिस्ट्री? राइट, ये तो बताना नहीं है. राइट, देयर आर सर्टेन थिंग्स व्हिच यू कैन रिमेंबर whenever such questions are asked to you in interview panel etc. So you can learn. एक तो बहुत easy है, we can learn lessons for the future. But इसी के ऊपर एक काउंटर क्वेश्चन आएगा कि do we always learn from history? Yes or no? आपने कल भी आंसर राइटिंग नहीं करी थी, आज भी नहीं कर रहे हो. हाँ, तो मतलब कार्ल मार्क्स हिमसेल्फ हैज ऐसे भी आया था इस बार. You have seen the theme of essay. The history repeats itself. If we learn from it, how can it repeat? हाँ, तो वो तो मैं समझ गया कि history is repeating itself. So do we always learn? मेरे से भी ये क्वेश्चन पूछा गया था इंटरव्यू में कि भाई हिस्ट्री रिपीट करती है कि नहीं करती है. Tell us some events in which we learned from history. Tell us some events in which we did not learn from history. ठीक है. So you tell me, are there some events in which we have really learned? League of Nations, that was reason for its failure, right? ठीक है, yes, and that also helped in avoiding Second World War. So we learned, yes. Not learned तो आपको पता ही है सारे. In which we have learned, वो बताओ.
The Treaty of Versailles जैसा हमने treaty नहीं बना.
हाँ? Yes, Treaty of Versailles के टाइप का treaty नहीं बना लास्ट में. Eventually it was the cause for the Second World War. से बाहर भी आ जाओ. In which we have learned, yes, we are actively avoiding wars with Pakistan because war लड़के कोई फायदा नहीं होता है, पागल आदमी है. What have we learned from partition? आज religious divide बिल्कुल नहीं है. Okay, we did learn from Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, we were actively engaging, okay, and that led to the execution of the Rajiv Gandhi, है ना? तो in that we learned कि अब हम उतना ज़्यादा interfere नहीं करते हैं किसी भी politics में. That we learned in the foreign policy. There can be n number. We have learned from the economic crisis of 1991 that we should create such institutions which can ensure better economy for India. Even though आज की डेट में RBI वगैरह हर बार बस चिट्ठी आ रही है, गलती हो गई, 6 से ऊपर चला गया इन्फ्लेशन रेट. But anyway, we do learn and you should remember these events. Reason being, when you're asked on the spot, you should be able to answer it. Okay, so one can be easily, we can learn from the, or we get lessons for the future. Second, it also helps us to think historically. What is the meaning of thinking historically? Anything happens to your life, you can easily relate it to the past event. कि नहीं, ये चीज तो पहले हो चुकी है. Okay, so you can think historically कि इस event कहाँ तक लेके जा सकता है. What is the scope? है ना? When we learn, जब हम lesson learn करते हैं तब तो already वो चीज हो चुकी होती है. But in some cases, we can even think that this can go up to there. So we can learn to think historically also. Okay, then you can see, make us aware about entangled elements of continuity and change. What has changed and what has continued. Okay, so you see the various languages that we have, they are now intermixed. Okay, कितने सारे words हैं किसी language से हैं. So that shows कि how entanglement has happened of various elements. Okay, like you see the word India itself or the word Hindu, है ना? कहाँ से आया the word Hindu? It comes from the Sindhu, है ना? Arabs were using the word Hindu for the Sindh river, and from there the word has come. So it tells us about the entangled elements of change as well as continuity, the manner in which things have happened. Helps us appreciate various culture, ideas as well as traditions of others. This we are able to do. Okay, and family help generate gratitude for the events, memories and great men of the past. So if we see India as a modern nation, we celebrate some personalities every year, है ना? वो कैलेंडर में लगा होता है स्टेट के, आज किसका डेट है, आज किसका बर्थडे है, right? So we celebrate it. Why do we celebrate it? To reinforce the idea of nation in the making. We're trying to create a nation state, and for that we should have some personalities. Why is Gandhiji on every note? Because Gandhiji is a reflection of India nation. Similarly, you see Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. We are celebrating National Unity Day. Reason being, he was responsible for India's modern setup. If he was not there, it would have been very difficult to join so many princely states. And second, the exam for which you are fighting may not have been there. Indian Civil Services. He was the one who was in favor of this. This service should stay. While the people like Jawaharlal Nehru, they were completely against it. Because these darogas, these IS, these DMs, उन्होंने खूब पिटवाया इन लोगों को during the British rule. So they were fed up with this system. Okay, but he said कि यार system की गलती नहीं थी, वो तो लोग उसके ऊपर जैसे थे उनकी गलती थी. तो system को क्यों खराब तोड़ रहे हो? ठीक है. So these are the various viewpoints which you can remember whenever somebody asks you what is the importance of history as a subject. Okay. So all these points which I am telling you, you should remember them for your interview purpose. Our focus now is going to change towards the other elements of history, how we divide our history, all these schools, etc. Then I'll also give you a brief timeline of ancient India, so that from tomorrow onwards we can start on with our first topic. Kindly come to the handouts. The first topic in our handout is parameters of periodization. The first method of dividing Indian history was Hindu period, Muslim, and finally British. Now you tell me, is it a good method or is it a bad method? What are the problems that you see with this method of dividing Indian history? This was done by the colonial historians, okay, and this was not changed by the nationalist historian. It remained the same. When the Marxist school came, it questioned it. यार ये तो गलत चल रहा है कुछ. Now you tell me, what are the problems with this periodization? Why we shifted away from this? There are some reasons. The first one, using religion as a parameter. It's not good in itself. Okay. Why is religion being used? Next. That you understand? The main motivation behind it was divide and rule. Okay. Now let us try to challenge the idea of, like we understand, चलो ठीक है कोई नहीं, हमने बोल दिया कि हिंदू पीरियड है, but can we challenge the idea of Hindu period in whole of ancient India? Yes. How? Buddhism, like if we see the biggest empire of India, Mauryan Empire, it was giving patronage to Buddhism, not Brahmanism for that sake. Similarly, we have King Kharavela, he was giving patronage to Jainism. So it was not linked to any one religion. So how can we use that? Okay. Second, if we see the Muslim period, during the Muslim period, yes, majorly we had, but we did have dynasty like Vijayanagar. Okay. Similarly, the basic structure of Indian society, it remained the same. It was not like that the Islam percolated to each and every part of society, so that we can call the Muslim period. So, yes, Indian जो division था, it remained largely on the basis of caste system. वो change नहीं हो पाया. It could not be changed. Okay, so that's why using the Muslim period for this is also not correct. And finally, let us see like how cleverly the people, they have not used the word Christian. They have used the word British. What is the reason? Christian word will reflect that all the Christians, they are now part of India. Okay, so they wanted to promote only their own interests. So if we take even their own parameter, it should be Christian period, not British period. Why are they using this? Okay, so we are able to understand the idea in itself is wrong, and if we somehow accept the idea, the manner in which they have used the British period, this is wrong as per their own criteria. So we do not accept it. Reason being, religion can never be a criteria for dividing history. It cannot be a criteria. The criteria which we use right now is the significant social and economic changes. Significant social and economic changes. This is the criteria. Kindly remember this. This is a question which can come to you. This kind of question has also come in modern India in 2012. The manner in which the currently India's periodization is done, this is currently in reference with the international standards. Currently the international standards are ancient India or ancient world, medieval world or modern world. This is the manner in which we have divided the whole history in the world also. Similarly, in India, we have divided into ancient India, medieval and then modern. And the basic parameter for that is social and economic changes. Okay, you have to remember this. But in Indian case, we also use a significant period. So we have currently ancient India, then medieval India, but in between we have a phase from around 750 to 1200 AD that has its own features, and that is known as early medieval period. This is something which is unique to India. Okay, and this shows the transition. This shows the transition from ancient India to medieval India, in which the political structure was changing, economy was changing, religion was changing, even the overall caste system, it was changing. Agriculture was becoming prominent, trade was declining, okay, there was no central authority in India. So all these parts of transition, they are reflection of early medieval period. So in India we have ancient India, then early medieval period, then medieval India, and finally modern India. So this is the manner in which we are dividing this history on the basis of significant socio-economic changes. Okay, so kindly remember this: ancient India, early medieval period, medieval, and finally modern India. These are the parameters of periodization which we are using, and we have already understood why we are criticizing the previous periodization, which is done by nothing but the British or the colonial people. Okay, if any time they ask you such kind of questions in interview, I think you will be able to handle it. Now in your handouts, come to page number 2. Schools of Historiography. See the definition of historiography, it is bold, okay, bold mein rakha hua hai. The scholarly activity of constructing and writing history. It is nothing but the process, the manner in which history is written, okay, which we have just discussed. Then there are certain schools of historiography. The first school, it was known as Orientalist. Orientalists were nothing but these people were interested in knowing about India, but for the sake of using this knowledge in the running Indian administration. So these initial people, they came to known as Orientalist. Okay, Orientalist, why? Because they wanted to promote learning of Indian cultures. That's why they are known as Orientalist. Okay, they are a sub part of the colonial school. When we talk about the colonial school, तो उसका जो पहला सब स्कूल है in India, okay, that was Orientalist. See the important scholars: Sir William Jones, Wilkins, as well as Max Muller. These were the important people. Okay, kindly see the reasons why this school was developed. It is given in your handouts. First one, to serve the needs of British colonial administration. Okay, then Christian missionary, they sought this to uncover the vulnerability in Hindu religion. That's why so that they can convert people. Okay, because of these factors, this school was developed. See the institutions which were created in order to read or learn about Indian history. Like all of you know about Asiatic Society of Bengal. This was created in 1784. Then Geological Survey, it was developed. Then Archaeological Survey of India, Bombay Asiatic Society, Asiatic Society of Great Britain. Okay, all these various institutions, they were brought in so that they can learn about India. Okay, after that, see the contribution. What was the contribution of these people? So one major contribution of these were, first one, translation of ancient Indian text. This was important. Like today you have Bhagavad Gita is in English. Who is responsible for that? These people. These were the people who started translation. Okay. Then second was external promotion. Indian history, it got promoted in different countries, specifically in Britain. Okay. And finally, they also developed the initial field of epigraphy. You understand? The study of inscriptions, numismatic study of coins, okay, archaeology of all the remains, and study of art and architecture. These people were also responsible for decipherment of some of the Ashokan Brahmi and script. Like all of you know about James Prinsep. So he deciphered the inscriptions of Ashoka. So all this is the contribution of these people. But at the same time, you see what was the context of these writings. Okay, what were the problems with them? The first problem that we can see with this school was the manner in which the history of India was divided, where the periodization was done on the basis of religion. This was the first problem with this. Okay. Second, you can see they stated that ancient India lacked sense of history, elements of time and chronology. This is what they said, the manner in which they were criticizing. Then, whatever history they have written, that is on the basis of Brahmanical text. By its very virtue, those people who are writing history, do you think they'll criticize themselves? No, they'll criticize the other people. Since they were dependent upon Brahmins, so whatever is written by Brahman became the history of colonial people. They did not even see the reality. Reality में caste system कैसे काम कर रहा है? Okay, all of you know about the concept of dharma shastra. So, as per dharma shastra, every person has a dharma, and he or she should always follow that. But to what extent that is followed, all of us know, right? आज की डेट में तो हंसी मजाक बन गया कि ब्राह्मण होके you are eating chicken, this or that. But even at that point of time, if it is written in the shastra कि you should not do so, you should not eat meat, is it so कि हर कोई ऐसे करने वाला है? Everybody going to follow that? Nobody was following it in literal sense. But the history written by these English people, they did not understood this कि ऐसा है कि नहीं है. Okay. Then the various Indian social and religious institutions, they were criticized from Western point of view. Okay, and that's why they said India is a very backward civilization on the basis of this. Okay, all the Indian political system, they were considered despotic. They did not do any research on Ashoka, the manner in which he was pursuing the policy of Dhamma. Okay, they still said all were despotic. They did not research 6th century BC, where we were having the republics. Okay, where people used to come together and then take decision collectively. Okay, you're able to understand all this? All this was इतना पेन उन्होंने लिया ही नहीं, पहले हिस्ट्री लिख दी और काम खत्म, देखेंगे बाद में. Then you can see they exaggerated the impact of foreign influence on ancient India. Why? Yes, to justify their rule. That's why Alexander, he was considered as the great. This question was asked by UPSC in 2020. If we see the Alexander invasion from Indian point of view, can we call him the great? We should not. कि भाई आप तो प्रॉपर इंडिया पहुंचे भी नहीं थे, पहले वापस निकल लिए. So how can we call you the great? You did not fight with the major power of India. It was the Nandas. Okay, and whatever impact you have left for India, it is indirect in nature. Direct impact is very less. But still, the British have exaggerated the impact of foreign invasions. और यहीं से UPSC ने क्वेश्चन बनाया था डिबेट वाला. Okay, so you need to understand these historical schools so that whenever you are writing debates, कोई भी आंसर लिखना है तो यहाँ इसको यूज कर सको. 2028 में क्वेश्चन आया था कि if we re-evaluate the role of Alexander in Indian history, so we should not call him the great. The great word बनने के लिए आपको बहुत कुछ करना पड़ता है. हाँ, हर चीज में, like you see, we call Ashoka the great, we call Akbar the great because of the quality they had, because of the administration, polity, economics, all the national lives, you can say features was changed by these people. But was it done by Alexander in India? Why are we calling him Alexander the Great then? He can be called the great in European history, not in Indian history. But still he got that, उसको position दे दिया. किसने दिया? Colonial historians, because they wanted to show कि India has always been ruled by invaders. Okay, but they are very, very shrewd people. They said Alexander the Great, but they did not say Mahmud the Great. But they did not say Muhammad Ghori the Great. Reason being, it is going to publicize Muslim rule. And they were not going to do so. They will always say Alexander the Great. बस उसको याद करो. एक बार आया था यहाँ तक पास में. Okay. Then you can say, in sum, if we see the various interpretation of the British, they try to denigrate the Indian character, achievements and justify colonial rule. So if UPSC anytime कभी question आ जाए ऐसा, so you will be able to write all this कि भाई the interpretation or the criticism of this rule. Okay, so this was the first school of historiography, which the main focus of these people was to perpetuate colonial rule. Their main focus was not to create the true picture of Indian history. क्या focus था उनका? हमारे rule को whatever is going to help that, we are going to do so. बाकी सब बाद में देखेंगे. Alright, let us see the next school. The next school is nationalist. And as a reaction, in every country this has happened. Whatever is said by the colonial power, that will be counted by the nationalist. And this has happened in India also. Okay, see the important scholars who were part of this school. It includes Rajendra Lal Mitra. Okay, it includes R.G. Bhandarkar or Ramakrishna Gopal Bhandarkar. It includes Pandurang Mankane or P.V. Kane. Okay, it includes Hemchandra Ray Chaudhary, R.C. Majumdar, K.P. Jaiswal. These are the various personalities who are linked with the nationalist school. Okay, let us see their contribution. Their major contribution is to reconstruct the social as well as political history. Major focus was political itself. Okay, Rajendra Lal Mitra, he focused on rationalist view of ancient history. R.G. Bhandarkar, you can see, he reconstructed the political history of Satavahanas, okay, who were less known. P.V. Kane, his major focus was on Dharma Shastra. Okay, similarly, Devadatta Ramakrishna Bhandarkar, he published book on Ashoka. S.C. Ray Chaudhary focused on Mahabharata war. Okay, Majumdar, overall history of ancient India. Neelkant Shastri, he focused on the supremacy of Brahmins. Okay, K.P. Jaiswal, he wrote about the self-governance or republics in 6th century BC. This is the overall contribution that they have provided to ancient India. But let us see the limitations. What are the limitations? First of all, they did not challenge the periodization of Indian history. And second, there was some communal character in their writings, meaning majority of their focus was on ancient India, not on medieval India. Okay. So, communal tendency to valorize the Hindu period and to project the advent of Turks and Islam as a calamity and tragedy can be seen in their writings. Okay. So, these are the two major limitations of nationalist school of historians. Let us see the next school, that is Marxist. Depend करता है what kind of question they are asking. Okay, if they give you a very easy question, the easy question which used to come, analyze the various approaches with respect to ancient India or early Indian history. So there चारों approach आपको लिखना है, contribution, थोड़ा criticism, contribution and criticism. This is what you can write. ऐसे देखो हम में से कोई तो है नहीं जो मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा दिल पे लेके बैठा हो कि I am the Marxist. Okay, so we just have to see it from the point of view of broadness. जो जितने ज़्यादा अच्छे से पॉइंट्स कवर कर दे वो हमारे लिए काफ़ी है. एंड यूपीएससी में ज़्यादा नंबर भी उसी को मिलते हैं दोज हु आर एबल टू राइट आंसर होलिस्टिकली. ओके, एंड इफ दे से जस्ट देन यस्टरडे अगर आपने देखा होगा एक आंसर राइटिंग सेशन था वेयर आई वाज एक्सप्लेनिंग, बाकी डिपेंड करता है डायरेक्टिव पे. इफ दे से एक्सप्लेन, जैसे आ भी सकता है आज की डेट में, ओके, एक्सप्लेन द कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ द नेशनल स्कूल ऑफ इंडियन हिस्टोरियोग्राफी. जब बोल ही दिया एक्सप्लेन द कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन तो फिर वहां पर नेगेटिव लिखने की जरूरत नहीं है. देयर यू जस्ट फोकस ऑन द कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशन. But in general, if they say critically examine the various schools of Indian historiography, then you can do both contribution and limitation. हाँ, एनालाइज में दोनों करेंगे. ठीक है, जल्दी से एक बार मार्क्सिस्ट हिस्टोरियोग्राफी वाला देखो. This book you may have also heard of, The Wonder That Was India, A.L. Bhasham. Right, so he was a Marxist person. After that we have D.D. Kosambi. Even our NCRT, it is written by R.S. Sharma. R.S. Sharma himself is a Marxist historian. That's why I always say कि जब भी NCRT पढ़ते हो, that is only one point of view of seeing the historical events. That's why we are shifting towards Upinder Singh. Reason being, in her writings we do not find any personal opinion. उन्होंने बस ये कहा, इन्होंने ये कहा, उन्होंने वो कहा, इन्होंने ये कहा. ठीक है, इट्स अ कंपाइलेशन ऑफ वेरियस व्यू पॉइंट्स ऑन एवरी पार्ट ऑफ आवर सिलेबस. ओके, एंड सिमिलर थिंग इज डन बाय शेखर बंदोपाध्याय इन मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री. ओके, सिमिलर थिंग डन बाय द, इफ यू सी द इग्नू मटेरियल ऑफ मिडिएवल, उन्होंने भी वही किया हुआ है, डिफरेंट व्यू पॉइंट्स को मेंशन किया हुआ है एक जगह. Similar thing you find in the writings of Ranjan Chakrabarti in World History, where they have just collated the historical viewpoints of various historians. They themselves are not that much recognized as historians. They are more of scholars than historians. Okay, you understand the difference between scholar and historian? Scholar is someone who is reading modern India excessively. जो भी लिख रहा है उसको पढ़ते हैं और फिर उसको कोलेट करके एक नरेटिव बनाता है, ठीक है. हिस्टोरियन इज समवन हु इज डूइंग द रिसर्च ऑन द फील्ड. पूरी जिंदगी निकल के फिर एक बुक आती है, दैट इज ए हिस्टोरियन. ठीक है. लाइक लास्ट ईयर आई थिंक वन ऑफ द कैंडिडेट ही वाज आस्क्ड अ क्वेश्चन कि डू यू थिंक उपिंदर सिंह शी इज अ वेरी गुड हिस्टोरियन. सो व्हाट डू यू से कि हमारे तो सर वही पास करा रही है. आग से आगे हमें नहीं पता. ओके सर, तो इम्पॉर्टेंट वंस आप उनका थोड़ा सा अगर हिस्टोरियोग्राफी में कुछ काम किया है उन्होंने या फिर कुछ स्पेसिफिक इंडिपेंडेंट रिसर्च किया है, दैट यू शुड नो. लाइक RS Sharma himself has various theories, right? Similarly, if you see Romila Thapar, she also has her own interest in Ashoka as well as Mauryas, है ना. वहाँ पे उन्होंने काफी ज्यादा रिसर्च किया हुआ है, वो आपको पता होना चाहिए. जैसे कि इफ यू सी उपिंदर सिंह, हर वन मोर बुक इज देयर विच इज नॉट रेलिवेंट फॉर एग्जाम पर्पस, पॉलिटिकल वायलेंस इन एंशिएंट इंडिया. यू मस्ट हैव सुना टाइटल का ना, तो एक दो याद करने पड़ेंगे. ऐसा नहीं कि हाँ सर वो बुक है, सर ने बोला था, पेज नंबर भी बता दिए थे. हम तो बस वो पढ़ के आए हैं यहाँ पर. तो वहां पे बताना नहीं है कि मैं ऐसा हूं, वहां पे बताना है कि नहीं, आई एम ए वेल रेड पर्सन. Okay, so these historians, their contribution, they are asked in interview hall, they ask you, tell me 3 living historians. तो आप सोच रहे हो यार लिविंग में कौन कौन है जो जिंदा है. RS शर्मा है, अभी बिपिन चंद्र है, लेकिन निकलेंगे यही. यू हैव टू रिमेंबर कि लिविंग में कौन है. इरफान हबीब, रोमिला थापड़ का नाम मत लेना. रीजन बीइंग शी इज अ कंट्रोवर्शियल पर्सनालिटी, है ना. एंड विद करंट डिस्पेंशन विच इज एट द सेंटर, तो बिल्कुल 36 का आंकड़ा है. तो ऑलवेज पिक सच हिस्टोरियंस विच आर नॉन कंट्रोवर्शियल फॉर इंटरव्यू पर्पस. जबरदस्ती कंट्रोवर्सी में जाने को फायदा है जहां आपको खुद नहीं पता उन्होंने क्या काम किया हो, सिर्फ नाम पता है उन्होंने क्या काम किया, क्या पॉजिटिव क्या नेगेटिव, यू डू नॉट नो, और आप वहां पे उसको करेक्टर सर्टिफिकेट दे रहे होंगे. ठीक है. सो इट्स बेटर टू चूज सच पीपल हु आर नॉन कंट्रोवर्शियल इन नेचर. ठीक है. बताएंगे इंटरव्यू के टाइम पे किसका बताना है. फिर वही बात, डिफरेंस बिटवीन प्रोफेसर एंड हिस्टोरियन. जब वो हिस्टोरियन बोले तो प्रोफेसर स्कॉलर नहीं बताने होते हैं. दे फील. फिर उनका अगला क्वेश्चन आएगा, डू यू कंसिडर हिम एज ए हिस्टोरियन. देन फिर क्या बोलोगे, यस और नो, दोनों में फंसोगे. अगर नो बोलोगे तो अपने आप को कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट कर रहे हो, यस बोल रहे हो तो फिर बोलेंगे कि इसको तो बिल्कुल नहीं आता कुछ. सो चूज सेफ पीपल. ठीक है. सो मार्क्सिस्ट हिस्टोरियोग्राफी, काइंडली सी द कंट्रीब्यूशन. लाइक A.L. Bhasham, there was a great shift from political to non-political history. Okay. D.D. Kosambi, he came up with an introduction to study of Indian history. First focus on various social and economic development in terms of tribal and class processes. Okay. And even after that we have seen the works of RS Sharma. RS Sharma has also given the theory of feudalism. Feudalism पे Indian feudalism पे उन्होंने book publish किया था around 1965. Okay. See the various limitations. Now which are the problems? They often tend to work with unilinear historical models derived from Western historical and anthropological writings. Every country has its own historical process. They have some different kind of society and economy. But what these Marxist historians do, whatever methods are used in Europe, those methods are being used in Indian context. तो ये एक criticism रहता है इनका कि you directly are importing those things even though they may be irrelevant. Like we can see the use of class instead of caste. This shows कि भाई so what the parameters that you are using, they are unrealistic. Okay. Second, if we see archaeological data was included, but the basic framework of historical narrative, it remained text centric. Okay. We find texts were read uncritically. Okay. And problems with respect to chronology, they have remained in their work also. The focus on class meant less attention to other bases of social stratification. Okay, if you see Indian society, if you stratify Indian society, सबसे बड़ा factor क्या आएगा? Caste. But they have not focused on it. Their main focus was class itself. All right. And finally, religion and culture was sidelined or mechanically presented as reflections of socio-economic structure. As all of you know, Karl Marx used to say that religion is an opium for the masses. That's why their research on religion are always going to be less, because they find it irrelevant for their studies, and that gets reflected in their work. Okay. Then the last school is subaltern. Initially, this subaltern school, it was a sub part of Marxist only. Okay, it derived from there itself. And the father of this school in India is Ranjit Guha. The school became prominent in 1980s, and their focus is on history from below. Okay, so they differentiate history in terms of elite history versus real history. They consider the elite history as wrong history, something which is not that important. Suppose whenever you read ancient India, आपका ध्यान किस पे जाता है सबसे पहले? अशोका, महाजनपदा, बुद्धा, इनके अलावा कुछ आता है? No. So what they say, the real history is hidden, and we are working on that. We are trying to create the history from below. Or what was the role of masses in that history? And they say whatever history we know so far, this is elite history, and this paints not a good picture of ancient India. Okay, so their focus is on researchers. They are trying to bring in categories like peasants. They are trying to bring in role of women, tribals. They are trying to bring in various regions which do not have history. Like Bihar has very rich history, right? सबसे rich history मेरे ख्याल से, if we see only one province, it goes to Bihar. Haryana has no history. कोई पढ़ा है इवेंट? बस बैटल ऑफ पानीपत छोड़ के. Okay, so from that we can see there are certain regions जिनकी history कोई सुनता ही नहीं है, जो टेक्स्ट बुक तक पहुंचती ही नहीं है. So these subaltern school, it is now focusing on these elements. Similarly, you see Northeast. To what extent Northeast is represented in our history books? घूम फिर के वो दो इवेंट्स आते हैं मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री में, एक कनिंगन सर्कुलर आता है, एक रानी गेडिनलो. उसके अलावा कुछ पढ़ते हो? होम आ जाएगा. कितना मतलब उसमें भी एक राजा का नाम बता दो. Tell me the name of one king. You understand? These are the things which are not represented in our history writing, and अब उसी के ऊपर main focus है. ठीक है? To come to the next page, जहाँ पे हमने लिखा है what should be the new history. These are the areas which should be considered while writing history, and they are being considered by the subaltern school. First of all, they should represent the hitherto unrepresented regions like Northeast. Or there can be certain states where we do not have that much connected history. We should focus on that. Second, it should represent the history of the marginal groups, all these marginal groups, peasants, women, tribals. Okay, it should reflect the social fabric, what the society is all about right now. India's all other cultural traditions. Every tradition may not have history, okay, which is written in nature. We should focus on that. There can be various things which are oral tradition है ना हर culture में. We should try to cover that also. Even though we can write down कि भाई we have not found any specific fact or evidence, but we should try to learn about it. We should understand the history of art and architecture. Art and architecture में कितना पढ़ते हैं हम? बस ठीक है, नगारा इधर है, तो द्रविडियन बीच में कहीं वेस रहा है, that's it, है ना, done, dusted. So we should focus on that also. We should focus on religious cult and traditions. Okay, look, India is a place of spirituality. Maximum number of world religions have been given by India. Okay, so that's why for us, it's a heritage. It's a tag we cannot avoid. And it's not like the world religion is something negative. है ना? Religion provides us the basic ethics of life. Start तो वहीं से होता है ना? So it can have multiple positive instances or positive influence on our lives. And as somebody who is trying to become विश्व गुरु, है ना? विश्व गुरु बन गए हम. तो विश्व गुरु बनना है तो it should come from the time of spirituality is important for us. So our history writing should also focus on that. Okay? We should also focus on external relationships कि भाई हर चीज का किसी और के साथ क्या connection है. And finally, we should understand that identity politics should not be done. है ना? Whenever history is written, eventually what happens? It is influenced by the ideology of the ruling party. I was asked this question कि हिस्ट्री बार बार लिखनी चाहिए कि नहीं लिखनी चाहिए, तो आप क्या बोलते हो, लिखना चाहिए या नहीं? सपोज यू बिकम सीएम टुमारो, हिस्ट्री दोबारा चेंज कराओगे कि नहीं कराओगे? इसका सेफ आंसर यही होता है, हिस्ट्री सर इज वेरी डायनामिक इन नेचर. ओके, एंड हिस्ट्री बाय इटसेल्फ इज नथिंग, इट इज द इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ सोर्सेस. इफ वी फाइंड सम न्यू डायनामिक रिसर्च, हो सकता है ना, जैसे कि गवर्नमेंट के बहुत सारे आपको चीजें मिलेंगी विच आर क्लासिफाइड इन नेचर, लाइक डॉक्यूमेंट्स रिलेटेड टू सुभाष चंद्र बोस, सपोज इफ दे आर रिलीज 20 years from today, okay, or document related to any specific event which is currently not there, like emergencies document were released way after. So history can be written if we have access to new documents, if there are new interpretation, but all such things, they should be shielded from politics. If politics is driving history writing, that is something wrong. And it happens in Bangladesh. There are two parties, है ना? Whenever the other party comes, पिछले वाले की पूरी हिस्ट्री खत्म कर देते हैं. Okay, Awami League and Nationalist Party, Bangla Nationalist Party. Okay, these are the two parties in Bangladesh, and it happens all the time. They change the history. Awami League, you understand, na? They were responsible. Mujibur Rahman, he belonged to Awami League. Okay, and he was the person responsible for creation of Bangladesh, है ना? Initially he was the one. India का role भी आता है in liberation, but he was the main personality. But he was executed. He was killed in a coup. But somehow again they were able to, his family, okay, it was came back to power. So there is always a fight. They try to change history whenever they come to power. They justify their rule. Okay. आइडेंटिटी क्या होता है? आपकी आइडेंटिटी किस चीज से बनती है? आपकी लैंग्वेज से बनती है, आपकी रिलीजन से बनती है. दीज आर द आइडेंटिटीज वी हैव. सो सच हिस्ट्री शुड नॉट बी रिटन विच डिवाइड्स पीपल ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दीज आइडेंटिटीज. ओके, देखो, इन इंडिया आइडेंटिटी पॉलिटिक्स विल नेवर स्टॉप. ऑल ऑफ अस अंडरस्टैंड दैट. ऐसा हो सकता है क्या आप और मैं रहेंगे तब तक? तो नहीं होने वाला है. आगे देखते हैं 50 साल बाद, लेट्स सी ऑफ 50 years आफ्टर ऐसा कुछ चेंज हो जाए. एंड आई एम नॉट सेइंग दिस इज गुड और दिस इज बैड. एवरीबडी हु एंटर्स द फील्ड ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स, दे आर बाउंड बाय दिस. ओके, हिस्ट्री शुड बी इंडिपेंडेंट. वी ट्राई टू से दैट. ओके, बट कितना होता है वो तो आप भी जानते हैं, मैं भी जानता हूँ कि इवेंचुअली इट्स गोइंग टू चेंज. जिसका भी आना उसका पर्सपेक्टिव चेंज होगा. आई थिंक लास्ट ईयर केरला में हुआ था ना, देयर वाज वन इंसिडेंट in which they were trying to change the basic NCERT and there were so many demonstration against it. Okay, it's going to happen. The reason is, in some cases the history which has already been written, it is so bad, or the methods which have been used for writing history is they were unclear, but still they have come up to conclusions. Like suppose if a Marxist person is writing history, they said India was having feudalism, and still we do not find any evidence. Do you think that should be changed? It should be changed, right? अगर हमारे पास उसके ऊपर और रिसर्च होता तो चेंज होना चाहिए. बिकॉज बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें जहां पे कंक्लूजन दे दिया गया है बट देयर वाज नो कंक्लूजन. द प्रॉब्लम विद द ह्यूमन माइंड इज वी लाइक कंक्लूजन्स, वी डू नॉट लाइक अनसर्टेनिटी. जैसी अनसर्टेनिटी आती है हम जल्दी से कोशिश करते हैं कुछ फाइनली इधर या इधर हो जाए, काम खत्म करो. ये नहीं हो पाएगा, बार बार रोज रोज सेम क्वेश्चन, राइट? इसलिए तो जनरल स्टडीज में डिबेट्स नहीं होती. जनरल स्टडीज में और हिस्ट्री ऑप्शन में क्या डिफरेंस है? हेयर वी लर्न टू अप्रिशिएट डिबेट्स, हेयर वी लर्न टू अप्रिशिएट लैक ऑफ क्लैरिटी. Like if somebody asks you what is the reason responsible for the downfall of Maurya Empire, can you say there is only one reason responsible for it? No. So we are still unclear about it. But in GS हम कहते हैं हाँ 5 रीजन है, ये बस लिख दो, काम खत्म करो. Alright. So that's why now we are trying to appreciate lack of clarity in some of the viewpoints. Alright. तो ये भी हम नहीं बोल सकते. मतलब देख हर किसी like suppose the worst school is colonial from our perspective. Reason being their focus was not on writing history, they were just trying to justify their rule. But if we see the nationalist historians, do you think at that point of time they were having that much luxury of the scientific innovations? They were not having it. Okay, and always the first generation is going to be criticized by the next one. आज आप अपने पेरेंट्स को क्रिटिसाइज करोगे, नेक्स्ट वाली आपके लिए तैयार बैठी है. Okay, this is going to happen. So even if we are dissatisfied, we have to show कि भाई उनका positive contribution क्या था and what were their limitations. So we cannot say this is the best school, but going forward I would say कि सबसे अच्छा school subaltern निकलेगा. Reason being whatever progress we have made, this is already done. अगर फ्यूचर की प्रोग्रेस नहीं देखोगे तो वो कहां से आएगी? दैट प्रोग्रेस इज गोइंग टू कम फ्रॉम द subaltern school, because the perspective of that school is 50 years ahead. Okay, वो वहीं से आपको मेन ग्रोथ दिखेगी इन टर्म्स ऑफ their main focus is on class struggle, है ना. Class struggle is one of the postulate of Karl Marx. Without class struggle the societies have not progressed. That's why they artificially comes up with this concept in Indian economy भी उनका रहता है. They say the whole society they are dependent upon the economy. So economic interpretation, this is going to be part of all the processes. Why the concept of feudalism was applied to India? Because feudalism is a economic concept in which the whole existence it depends upon land. Okay, why the concept of monetary anemia was brought in? Monetary anemia means lack of coinage. Why this was brought in? Because this is economic interpretation of history. Why the concept of urban decay was brought in? Economic interpretations. So whatever research they are going to do, they are going to bring in the elements of economy and class struggle. So they have already accepted it. It's not like something positive or negative. Everybody assumes something, then they start doing something. Like what is assumed by the subaltern school, कि we are going to focus on the history of common people. ओके इसके ऊपर भी डिबेट है. जब मॉडर्न इंडिया किया था उसमें आपने पढ़ा भी होगा, एक जगह बड़ा अच्छा डिबेट था. व्हाट दे से कि इवन द एलीट पीपल कैन हैव अ सबअल्टर्न पास्ट, है ना. एलीट पीपल कैन आल्सो हैव अ सबअल्टर्न पास्ट. सो व्हाई आर वी अवॉइडिंग द एलीट पीपल? जैसे you can take the example of any people, any personality, like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Today he is an elite personality, but his father or his, if we trace his family roots, they may have subaltern history. So the confusion starts कि इस concept के अंदर भी problem है. How are you going to decide who is a commoner? Okay, so every history writing has its limitations. Okay, then there is one more historian. He said, right now there is lack of subaltern studies in subaltern school. Okay, they come up with this different interpretation every time. Whatever research now they are doing on the common people or the areas which have not been touched upon by the previous history schools, वो सब subaltern के अंदर आ रहा है. इनिशियली था, बट आज की डेट में उसको इंडिपेंडेंट स्कूल ही रिकॉग्नाइज करते हैं. इनिशियली इट केम आउट फ्रॉम सबअल्टर्न इटसेल्फ, उसमें मार्क्सिस्ट आल्सो. यस, किसको? एलिट्स को इग्नोर करते हैं, बिकॉज एलिट्स आर ऑलरेडी रिप्रेजेंटेड इन हिस्ट्री. अब जरूरत है क्या अशोका पे और काम करने की? इवन दो फॉर क्लैरिटी पर्पस है, बट फ्रॉम द पर्पस ऑफ ग्लोरीफाइंग दैट पर्सनैलिटी, डू वी रिक्वायर एनी मोर वर्क? इट इज नॉट रिक्वायर्ड. दैट्स व्हाट दे से कि आप एलीट हिस्ट्री के पीछे पड़े रहते हो. ठीक है, लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड वन मोर इंपॉर्टेंट कंसेप्ट. प्री हिस्ट्री. हाँ, अभी वो करेंगे. there are three terms which can be used in questions. The first one is prehistory, second is proto, and the third one is historical period. Prehistory, I think it is relatively very easy to understand. It means there was absence of writing, okay, or script. When it comes to proto-history, there are different interpretation. The one which is most accepted one, क्या है most accepted one? Script is there, but it is not deciphered, no, or it is not deciphered. That is what proto-history is. That's why we consider Harappan civilization as part of proto-history. This is the most accepted viewpoint, but this is not the only viewpoint. Just kindly see your notes. If we see the European context, okay, if we see the European context, so what they say, people who did not themselves have writing, okay, but who are mentioned in the written records of a contemporary literate group, okay, they consider that as proto-history. If we see Indian context, so we have already discussed this, a literate culture but with an undeciphered script, okay, but some people, they even include Vedic people in the proto-history. What is the reason? Reason, their tradition was oral in nature. Tradition was oral, and whatever Vedas that they made or they composed, they were written down in after the 600 BCE, when we became aware of script or writing. That's why some historians even consider them as part of proto-history. Okay, but still there are archaeologists. Archaeologists, उनकी अपनी अलग दुनिया है. What they say, from the beginning of food production to the advent of iron technology, that is the meaning of proto-history. You are able to understand the three viewpoints. देखो कभी कोई debate आ जाए proto history पे, this is what you need to understand. There are three viewpoints. First one, Europeans. So what they said, the people themselves were not literate, but they found their mention in some other people's writings. Okay, that is European context. If we see Indian context, script is there, but it is undeciphered. Okay, but so due to this, some historians even consider Vedic period as part of proto-history. And finally, if we see archaeologists, they say beginning from the food production all the way up to the Iron Age beginning. This is the part of proto-history. Remember these three viewpoints. Okay, all three you should remember. Reason being, in some of the questions, proto-history will be easily used. Like this was done in 2017 by UPSC. At that point of time, what they did, they simply used the word proto-history along with Neolithic and Chalcolithic cultures. And you'll be like, ये क्यों use किया है? इसमें तो सिर्फ कौन सा आना चाहिए? हड़प्पा आना चाहिए. But if we see from archaeologist point of view, that was correct. So that's something you can mention in the introduction. Okay, this is the basic thing which you will remember for the word proto-history. The largely accepted viewpoint is known to all of you. The other viewpoint that I am highlighting, first is European, where they say the person themselves are not literate, but they are mentioned in the works of someone else. Archaeologists, they say beginning from Neolithic period or beginning of food production all the way up to the beginning of Iron Age. That is a part of proto-history. Is it clear? किसको? हाँ, because going by the same logic, like somebody is not having script. Were Vedic people having any script? They were not having it. That's why they are part of proto-history. Okay, but फिर दूसरे historians उसके अलग आ जाते हैं कि भाई they were composed eventually. We have access to Vedas and they tell us about that society. That's why they do not consider, they call it a part of historical period. Now the third part, historical period, it is very clear. We have script and it is deciphered, but it is different in North India. Okay, you see in the handout, in North India, it is believed to be around 6th century BC. Remember this? And you see the case of South India. So from South India, between 4th to 2nd century BC. This is the phase in which it became a historical society. Okay, keep a note of this. The historical period does not start in India in a uniform fashion. It starts in North India around 6th century BC when they became aware of script and this was being used for writing. In South India, we found references in Adi Chanalur, वहाँ पे हमें मिलती है early Tamil Brahmi script. Similarly, we also found the script in Sri Lanka, Anuradhapura. That's why we are able to understand historical period may have started in South India between 4th to 2nd century BC, but in North India around 6th century BC. This is the historical period. These are the three basic terminology which all of you have to understand. This can be asked in interview. This can often be used in your answers. Answers में भी use कर सकते हो. कभी कोई specifically technical question आता है, like such a question came in 2017. And if somehow you are attempting that question, if you have this knowledge, this is going to help you out. Yes. No. Archaeologist वाला नहीं. जो normal view है, script is there but it is not deciphered. That is the most accepted one. Archaeologist का अपना अलग view है. They say starting from the beginning of food production or Neolithic period all the way up to the beginning of Iron Age. So what is that time period? Time period is around 8000 BC to the 1000 BC. That becomes part of proto-history as per archaeologists. Okay, that is the viewpoint that they share. So अभी क्या है? The first school is it was a colonial school, and this colonial school, if you see, the initial were the Indologists or the Orientalists, but even today they are writing on India. So that school is currently known as Cambridge School of Thought or Cambridge School. Like you may have known, बहुत सारा debate आता है modern India में कि India was occupied unconsciously. Who is writing all these things? The Cambridge School. Okay, so it's a sub part of colonial school itself. National school, you can remember already आपका हो चुका है, ठीक है? Marxist, and last one is subaltern school. Subaltern में the main personality is Ranajit Guha. Along with them we also have Gyan Prakash. Okay, they are working on this history from below or Worm's view history from lower. Okay, these are the various schools which we need to remember. Now just see what is the syllabus of ancient India. Okay, this was the introduction. The first topic that we have is sources. Okay, this is from where we are going to start. If we see sources, archaeological and literary, these are the two major sources, archaeological and literary. Within this we have to differentiate indigenous and foreign accounts. Okay, this year UPSC asked one question on foreign accounts and majority of the question they come on the indigenous. This is the first part of your syllabus. Then prehistory and proto-history, in which we'll discuss जो भी हमने मैप में किया है, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, etc. All of this will cover in the class in detailed fashion. And then finally we go towards Indus Valley civilization, megalithic culture, Aryans and Vedic period of Mahajanpada. Then the remaining important dynasties. Okay, this is the syllabus which we will start. So let us try to understand the brief timeline. कौन कौन सी brief timeline महाजनपदा तक देखते हैं इसको. Paleolithic period, it is largely from 2 million BC to 10,000 BC. This I think most of you have covered in map also. You are able to understand this. Paleolithic period is itself divided into three parts. The first one is Lower Paleolithic. Lower Paleolithic time period is 2 million BC to 1 lakh BC. Okay, then Middle Paleolithic period is from 1 lakh to 40,000 and the Upper Paleolithic is from 40,000 to 10,000 BC. This is the differentiation within the Paleolithic period. In the generalized information we have already discussed the band living society. है ना? People used to live in the groups of 50 to 100. That was the maximum. They were dependent upon hunting and food gathering. Okay, this was the main part of Paleolithic. What are the important sites? Let us see किसको कितना याद है. Important sites of Paleolithic period. पहलगाम इफ यू स्टार्ट फ्रॉम जम्मू एंड कश्मीर. दिल्ली के आसपास कौन सी है? अनंतपुर. गुड. राजस्थान तिलवारा पैलेलिथिक में नहीं आती है, ठीक है. लूनी वैली, दिदवाना आते हैं. हाँ, तो सारे एक थोड़ा ना राजस्थान कि वेस्ट और ईस्ट ऐसे हैं. हर्ट हो जाएंगे यार राजस्थान के लोग, ऐसे मत करो. एनीवे, सो देन वी गो टू गुजरात वेयर वी फाइंड रोजदी, हिरान वैली. इफ वी गो टुवर्ड्स कर्नाटका वी फाइंड हुंसगी. ओके, इफ वी गो टुवर्ड्स तमिलनाडु वी फाइंड अतिरमपक्कम इज देयर. आंध्रा में रेनीगुंता इज देयर, है ना. यस, नेलोर इज देयर, है ना. So these are the various sites of Paleolithic period. Then we shift towards Mesolithic from 10,000 BC to 8,000, है ना. देखो ये जो टाइमलाइन है ना, ये हर बुक में आपको अलग मिलने वाली है. आप एक बेसिक याद कर लो और उसी को बार बार यूज करो. नोबडी इज गोइंग टू डिडक्ट योर मार्क्स फॉर द टाइमलाइन कि 10,000 से ये 7,000 कहीं पे लिखा, कहीं पे कुछ और लिखा, कहीं पे कुछ और. आप इसको याद कर लो, इसको फाइनल कर लो. वैसे भी इसको लिखने का मौका मिलता नहीं है पेपर में, बिकॉज क्वेश्चंस कम आते हैं यहाँ से. They only come in map. Paleolithic and Mesolithic. Mesolithic, we see the beginning of domestication of animals. This is the beginning. Then second, और कुछ भी था वहां पे. Microlith, the kind of tools which were used, right? Painting is very important element. These kinds of painting you find, है ना. Cave art, all right. Lithic tools. Then comes Neolithic period. In Neolithic period, we see the beginning of agriculture, settled communities. Okay, we also find invention of wheel, and with invention of wheel, we see the beginning of pottery. Okay? So all these are elements of Neolithic period. That's why sometimes Neolithic period is also known as Neolithic Revolution. We have one archaeologist, V. Gordon Child. Important sites, all of you know, Burzahom, Gufkoral. Okay. Koldi Hawa, Mehergarh, all these are the important sites of Neolithic. Along with that we have Chalcolithic period. In Chalcolithic period we see the first use of copper. Okay. Then finally we find various important cultures. Ahar hai, ठीक है, Banas, then Zorwe culture is there, Savalda culture is there, है ना. All these are the important cultures which we find. Then Indus Valley civilization, all the way up to 300 to 1300, 2000 years. It is further divided into three parts, है ना. Early Harappan phase, that is from 33 to 2600, from 2600 to 1900, and 1900 to 1300. These are the three phases of Harappan civilization. Okay, the mature phase is in between, 2600 to 1900, and this was the first phase of urbanization in India. What are the two important characteristics of urbanization or civilization? Script and cities. These are two important elements of civilization which differentiate it from a culture. After that, we see the beginning of Iron Age. Okay, Iron Age around 1000 to 600. Vedic period from 1500 to 600. Early Vedic period is from 1500 to 1000. 1000 to 600. This is time we became aware of Iron Age. Okay, so this is Vedic. Then finally we see the age of Mahajanpadas from 600 BCE onwards. Okay, where we see that 16 important states, they came into India. All right, so you're able to understand the brief timeline. So it starts with Paleolithic, then Mesolithic, Neolithic, after that Chalcolithic. Along with that we see the beginning of Harappan civilization. After that you see the coming of Vedic Aryans. And finally Mahajanpada. Okay, so if we see these three parts, we are completely dependent upon archaeological sources for writing history, We do not find any other source. Similar is the case with Chalcolithic. For Harappa, we have script, but it is undeciphered. So largely we have to depend upon archaeological sources. But there is one source which writes about Harappa. Mesopotamians. They have used the word Meluha. This is the definition of Europeans. The definition जहाँ पे contemporary people are writing about you. So literary is not entirely absent. We have foreign accounts in case of Harappa. Okay, but they are not that much, well, you can say detailed in manner. वहाँ पे सिर्फ export और import लिखा हुआ है. क्या हम import करते हैं, क्या export करते हैं, उससे ज़्यादा कुछ information आपको नहीं मिलेगी. Okay, starting from Vedic Aryans, literary sources became prominent. Okay, in Indian history. So these are the sources. So before going into this various topic, we'll first deal with sources. Every year UPSC asks questions from here. Archaeological sources and literary sources. Within archaeological sources, there are two categories of sources which are very important. First one is inscriptions, coinage, and then largely some of the monuments which provides us data, plus all the other material remains. When we say material remains, everything which is touched upon by the human, including their own skeletons. Okay, that is a part of material remains. Like if you see Paleolithic period, what all evidence do we collect for that? We collect their tools, okay, then we even collect the tools of animals. We even see the caves, etc., where they resided, the paintings that they made. All this is part of material remains, okay, which help us in understanding their history. Inscriptions, they became famous with the coming of Ashoka. Okay, Ashoka is the personality which is responsible for inscription which are deciphered. Undeciphered belongs to Harappan civilization. Okay, so kabhi question aa jaye prelims mein, the concept of inscription does not start with Ashoka. The concept starts from Harappan civilization, but they remained undeciphered. That is the problem that we face. The coinage starts from the period of Mahajanpada. Okay, and finally the monuments chalta rehta saath saath mein. Literary sources, if we see, they are broadly divided into religious and secular. In India, majority of the sources, they are religious in nature. Okay, like if you see all the Vedas, they are nothing but religious. Similarly, we have epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. We have Puranas. All these forms part of religious. This is with respect to Hinduism. Similarly, we have for Buddhism as well as Jainism. So India's majority of the literature, it is religious, but we do find some secular one, like we have Arthashastra. Okay, so there are some literature which is secular in nature, but even this is relatively very less. Okay, so for understanding the whole history, we should depend upon sources. They can be of two types, archaeological as well as literary sources. Now, one allegation which is put on ancient Indians is they had no sense of historical consciousness. It is being questioned कि historical consciousness था या फिर नहीं था. There is a very good concept which is given by Promila Thapar. She came up with concept of externalized history versus embedded history. Externalized history means history is itself a subject of study. These kinds of history writing we found in state-based societies like China, where the state is itself keeping the historical records. So we can easily have externalized history which can become an independent subject. But embedded history is found in lineage-based societies like India. It means that India has historical consciousness. But this historical consciousness is of which kind? Embedded type. And you have to work hard to find out the history from our text. हम आसानी से बताने वाले नहीं हैं. We'll give you Puranas, ढूंढ के दिखाओ हिस्ट्री कहाँ है. ठीक है? So the kind of historical tradition that we have, it's this embedded form of history, because India has lineage-based society. This you have to remember. Okay, this can even be asked in the interviews. Okay, were we having any kind of historical consciousness or not? For that we'll give you various examples. आपका जो कल हैंड आउट होएगा उसमें ये डिटेल में हम डिस्कस करेंगे कि हाउ वी कैन से. जब पूरा सोर्सेज का चैप्टर खत्म होगा, देयर आई आस्क यू क्वेश्चन दिस अगेन, बट फंडामेंटल्स आई एम टेलिंग यू राइट नाउ. Okay, कि we do have historical consciousness. It's not like we do not have historical consciousness itself, but it was not developed as a very independent subject. आज यूनिवर्सिटीज में हिस्ट्री पढ़ाया जाता है, सारे कोर्सेज चल रहे हैं, ऐसा नहीं था. ठीक है, इट वॉज देयर बट इट वॉज एम्बेडेड. कि थोड़ा रिलीजन के साथ में हल्का सा बता दे, 2 लाइन, हाँ वहां पे कुछ था. ओके, so this kind of history is known as embedded history. Keep that in mind. So from tomorrow we'll start with sources, है ना, जो अपना फर्स्ट टॉपिक है वहीं से स्टार्ट होता है. Today it was all about the orientation, what is the meaning of history, all this that. ये सारी चीजें समझ के रखना. These are not that much important from your exam point of view, but from the point of view of interview they are very relevant. Okay, keep that in mind. And I hope you are able to understand the basic timeline. क्या क्या है एंशिएंट इंडिया की? Yes. हिस्ट्री कैसी होनी चाहिए? आज आपको हिस्ट्री की अलग से बुक मिल जाती है, दैट इज एक्सटर्नलाइज. हिस्ट्री इटसेल्फ आपको बता रहे हैं, बस पढ़ लो. बट हियर यू कैन नॉट हैव डायरेक्ट एक्सेस टू हिस्ट्री. Along with the religious text, within this some historical information is provided. Like suppose when you read Vedas, then you come to know about कि there was sabha and samiti. It's not like इन्होंने अलग से बुक निकाला हुआ था सभा के ऊपर. That was not there. So it's a form of embedded history, where within the larger structure आपको कुछ history की information दे रखी है, but it is not that direct. Okay, and record of this is not separate. ठीक है, यहाँ पे state itself is making effort. That's why the history of China is very easy to understand, because state itself was keeping records. But in India it was not that much famous. We had historical consciousness, okay, but this consciousness was of which category? Embedded type. ठीक है?
But sir, this was not intentional. Consciousness was intentional.
We cannot say it is not intentional. I'll give you examples, तभी तो समझ में आएगा कि embedded history के अंदर कौन कौन सी चीज़ों को हम डालेंगे. अभी पहले वो concept सबसे लास्ट में करेंगे, because मैंने आपको बस बेसिक बता दिया. Because when you will be reading sources, somehow you will be able to understand कि are we having historical consciousness or not. वो आपको खुद से एक बार सोचना चाहिए जब हम पूरा सोर्सेज का चैप्टर पढ़ेंगे. इन द एंड विल कम टू द कंक्लूजन. अभी कंक्लूजन पर नहीं आता कि ये क्या है ये क्या है. बस आप कंसेप्ट समझ ले कि हाँ 2 तरीके की हिस्ट्री बन सकती है. वन विच इज कॉन्शियस, है ना, वन विच इज एक्सटर्नलाइज्ड, एंड द सेकंड वन कैन बी अ लिटिल बिट अनकॉन्शियस नॉट, बट इट इज एम्बेडेड. सो हिस्ट्री एज एन आइडिया was in Indian culture, but as a modern subject it was not there. ये हम मान सकते हैं. But we cannot say कि we had no sense of history, no sense of history at all. Like if you see Puranas, in Puranas they keep record of the genealogy of kings. So don't you think there is a kind of historical consciousness? अगर वो किंग, सारी गुप्ता डायनेस्टी की किंग की लिस्ट बना के बैठे हुए हैं पुरानास में, there is historical consciousness, but Puranas itself was not made for creating genealogy. वो बस बाद में बता दिया, हाँ गुप्ता भी है, उनमें ये सब होता. देख लो, it starts with Sri Gupta, ends with someone else. but we find the list of kings, which shows that historical consciousness is there, but it is of embedded form, it is not externalized form. ठीक है, थोड़ा सा टेक्निकल कंसेप्ट है, वापस दोबारा से रिपीट करेंगे, ऐसा नहीं कि दिस इज द एंड. टुडे इट्स जस्ट अबाउट यू गेट कंफर्टेबल कि देयर आर सम न्यू थिंग्स व्हिच यू गोइंग टू लर्न इन एंशिएंट इंडिया, एंड एंशिएंट इंडिया इज वेरी टेक्निकल इन कंपैरिजन टू द अदर हिस्ट्रीज. तो यहाँ सबसे ज़्यादा लेक्चर्स इसी के होते हैं. 5 तो आपके ऑलरेडी हो चुके हैं. आउट ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया इफ यू सी, कितना अटेम्प्ट कर सकते हो? 150 मार्क्स एट द मैक्स. उसका 50 नंबर का अलग क्लास हो चुका है मैप. नाउ वी आर गोइंग टू फाइट फॉर हाउ मच मार्क्स? 100 एट द मैक्स. अब उस 100 के लिए भी बहुत मेहनत करनी पड़ती है. रीजन बीइंग देयर आर वेरियस सच कंसेप्ट्स, इट्स नॉट वेरी स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड. ओके, सो विल मीट टुमारो. वो आप एक बार पहले पढ़ लो एंशिएंट इंडिया, देन यू विल रियलाइज कि आपको यहाँ से 2 करना चाहिए या मिडिवल से. आई यूज्ड टू डू इट फ्रॉम एंशिएंट बिकॉज इन एंशिएंट यू हैव टू रिमेंबर लेस. कंसेप्ट शुड बी क्लियर, बट इफ यू गो विद मिडिवल में रट्टा ज़्यादा है, कंसेप्ट कम है. जैसे कि मार्केट रिफॉर्म्स ऑफ अलाउद्दीन खिलजी, उसमें क्या कंसेप्ट है? इट जस्ट यू हैव टू रिमेंबर क्या क्या थे, कितनी मंडी बनाई, कितने ऑफिसर थे, किसका क्या टाइटल था. हाँ, वो मैंने आपको कल समझाया ही था कौन कौन से एरिया से. जैसे एवरी ईयर यू गेट 1 क्वेश्चन फ्रॉम सोर्सेज. इज दैट क्लियर टू ऑल ऑफ यू? द इनिशियल हाफ ऑफ एंशिएंट इंडिया, अगर वो भी आप अच्छे से कर लोगे टिल मौर्य, आपका काम है खत्म है क्वेश्चन के हिसाब से. आई एम नॉट सेइंग फ्रॉम सिलेबस पर्सपेक्टिव, बट वहां तक कम से कम अपनी पूरी एनर्जी लगा दो. रीजन बीइंग, अगर 2 क्वेश्चन करना चाहते हो एंशिएंट इंडिया से, द नेक्स्ट 12-13 क्लासेस विल बी एबल टू कवर इट. इवन दो टोटल क्लासेस तो आपकी 20-25 पहुंचने वाली हैं. इनिशियल 13-14 क्लासेस, जहां वहां तक जो सिलेबस है वहीं से आप 2 क्वेश्चन निकाल सकते हो. इट्स वेरी इजी. यस, हाँ, yes, that is also there. Like whatever, like in India when we were writing Puranas, we were not like कि भाई we have to show this to someone else in the future. It was just for our remembrance. So our history writing may not have the same standard as West. Exactly. हम ये conclusion में लिखते भी हैं. We should not evaluate ancient Indians from today's perspective or from modern parameters of history writing. They had their own parameters which they were following. Like एग्जैक्टली तभी हमने एग्जांपल दिया कि चाइना स्टेट बेस्ड सोसाइटी रहा है, एंड वी हैव बीन अ लीनिएज बेस्ड सोसाइटी. दिस इज आवर वे ऑफ रिमेंबरिंग हिस्ट्री, दिस इज देयर वे ऑफ रिमेंबरिंग हिस्ट्री. वी हैव डिफरेंट अप्रोचेस. ओके, सो दिस इज, वी कैन एग्जैक्टली से दैट. ठीक है, दैट्स इट फॉर टुडे. सलमान, कोई भी एक कर सकते हो, कोई भी एक डेफिनेशन, बट इट शुड बी बाय हार्ट. ओके, व्हाट इज हिस्ट्री.